Hi guys, so today I'm going to talk about Kriyas, which are a crazy thing, to be perfectly honest. They are spontaneous movements in your body that usually occur during a Kundalini awakening, but if you're involved in any healing journey, if you're involved in anything energetic, you can experience these. Usually we command our body to move, and suddenly we're allowing, energy to take its own form and spontaneously move our body for us, which can be kind of a humbling or scary or just fascinating, at least for me, experience that kind of gets me excited whenever it happens and leaves me in awe, quite frankly. But essentially, they are energy moving through us, discharging through our cells. It's like any of these emotions can be trapped in your body, right? Even blissful or pleasure states. And what happens in the awakening is unconscious material goes to conscious. Kriyas essentially are when they're moving from the dormant stage into the expressive phase. When we express things, we dispel, we purge. So we always want to move towards expression. They are necessary sometimes just because the body knows what to do with this stuff. The body knows how to dispel it. So you just kind of have to work with it. Kriyas can look like twitching of muscles, like tremors, like jerking, like shaking, yelling, violent movements. They can look like when you're channeling good positive emotions or source energy. They can look like graceful, blissful movements that almost look angelic in nature. They can look really tribal and dance-like. They can turn into yogic postures. Since Kriya is energy discharging, we have to look at other ways that energy discharges, which is yawning, through bowel movements, through orgasm, through crying, vocally, puking, or spitting up. So if you are in any way involved in healing, you might have this as a symptom. So I just, want to assure you not to get freaked out. It doesn't mean that you're being possessed. It doesn't mean that there's not a way to control it. It doesn't mean that it's anything harmful. The reason I'm filming this video is because I had a moment last night where I did some yoni steaming and did yoga after, which I've never done. My big problem area is my hips and, that whole saras area that holds a lot of fear. And I decided to turn the camera on, and I wanted, maybe to show what those kriyas can look like, what a trauma discharge of energy can look like. I just want you to understand that animals have this mechanism in the wild. They shake and tremble and release any panic or fight or flight mode immediately. And we don't have that mechanism. We freeze and lock and basically kind of take all these experiences in like a sponge and then have no way of dispelling it. So imagine a whole lifetime of that. That's years upon years upon years of frozen emotions. People who start meditating, people who start doing yoga, who start doing anything that involves spiritual energy is going to have some sort of encounter with these Kriyas. We just have to understand that shaking, that these expressions of the body are nervous system repairing itself. Shakti in this energy engages these blockages and then it works to dissolve them. Our nervous system knows how to deal with this stuff, but usually we stop the process. So the best thing to do with Kriyas is to kind of give yourself a time container in which to allow your body to express it. Just let's say you give yourself 5 to 10 minutes, which is what I did for myself last night. You have absolute control over it. Sometimes for me, my body will start locking and the tremors won't stop. And so when that time container is over, what I will do is I will put an open hand on my body and I will imagine relaxation and ease and kind of imagining the energy moving and the blockage dissolving and that openness that arises from that, because that's the energy that is actually necessary. When we go into lock mode, it's great to shake it out, but you have to give it what it needs ultimately. So give yourself these little pockets of time in which to really not inhibit the flow, the spontaneous Kriyas, because most of the time our head stops us from doing them fully. Let that inner judgment of how crazy it is go away, because I've been mid-Kriya being like, what the hell is this? I mean, still to this day, I'm like, what is going on? I know exactly what's going on, but you still feel weird about them because we're not used to these kinds of movements in our bodies. Really let them express themselves in full. Working on people's bodies, seeing how trauma and energy releases, seeing Kriyas in me, I'm starting to develop a theory of what they truly are, which is that in the awakening, all this unconscious material comes up. And that movement from unconscious to conscious is the path. But it can also be kind of very quickly, if something's buried in your unconscious and it suddenly becomes conscious, like that's a big deal. Truly, what we're dealing with is emotion. But when you can't access the emotion because the journey has been too fast from unconscious to conscious, and we need time to integrate and process. But I do believe that there's this physical layer that shows up first when there is a lot of buried energetic blockages underneath it, that you don't necessarily have the access to the emotion yet. So what arises is the physical, because I've never had an emotion during my Kriyas. You can see me crying and you can see me screaming. But if you ask me, is there an emotion attached to it? I'm like, no, it's purely my body using these senses and aspects of my body to emote. But I'm not genuinely feeling anything. It's kind of the first point of material that you get to work on if it's very ancient and buried or there's tons of stuff there. And I actually did a session on my partner the other day and he was just having physical layers. And one last big breath in. What does this feel like right here?
It's just everywhere. All at once.
Okay. Yeah, just letting your body do what it needs to do. Big breath. Fuck. Lots of breath the whole time. Lots of breath. Lots of breath. Yeah. So it's essentially just releasing a physical layer of tension in order to heal. As you move the Kriyas through, as you release the trauma tension, you will have access to the emotions. And that's what I think is so beautiful about this process, is that it feels crazy and it feels very physical and tough to just kind of move through. But underneath, once you actually move these blocks, what's underneath is the emotion that you can work with. Now I want to just talk a little bit about my personal experience with them. Through the awakening, you know, tons of areas of my body would genuinely feel like actual blockages that I would press on and breathe through, and my body would get into these like weird yogic postures in order to kind of move it around. My body would really move in these like belly dancing, you know, tribal like manners. I would have, you know, constant crying, puking rarely, but it always meant like it was something super deeply buried that had to be kind of purged. On the table, I've been getting that recently. When it's a bliss state, I get into a very grace-like manner and I dance, and it feels like I'm channeling higher vibrational energy. I also really would get it when I would listen to music that had like a deep bass or a vibration. I'm actually going to show you a snippet of the music playing that used to trigger these. My body will start kind of moving into these positions, so I'll show you what it looks like now. When I would meditate, it would happen I would basically just start swaying. Like I would meditate and my whole body would just move side to side. And part of that as well is when you have a dense physical body and high vibrational energy is moving into it, it starts to move in order to kind of match that high vibrational energy that's moving much, much faster. So that would happen to me during meditation. My head would start jerking. I've had my jaw locking, my hips locking, my whole body shaking. Recently, for the past year, I've had one main Kriya, and it has not fully moved yet, and it's this hand movement. And it starts locking, and this whole arm, just the right one, it will start trembling over and over again. Another thing to note is that most of my Kriyas would happen when I would be in a very relaxed mode. So meditation, yoga, I mean, yoni steaming triggered it yesterday because it absolutely just relaxes all the muscles of my vagina, of my uterus, of my hips. Like, it's the best tool I've ever had to really connect with this area. And when you really step into a deep relaxation, I feel like Kriyas can happen way more frequently. I don't think they've ever truly happened without me venturing into the mode of openness and relaxation and breath in the body. Don't sit down and have an emotional healing session or get on the body work table and it's done for me. Like for me, because I have this Kundalini moving through me, and it's very subtle, it's still 24/7. So I am very used to these kinds of things. I just have to remind myself that there is no line where I start healing and I stop healing, or I take the time for healing. It's like it's happening all the time, and it's taken me 3 years to still get comfortable with that 24/7 idea. Like today, for example, I thought, well, I'm gonna, do my work and do a video, and instead my hips started releasing, my body started locking, I cried, and it took about 30 to 40 minutes, and then I had to start my day. And I never know when it's gonna hit. You just don't know when your body is ready to release a layer. The Kriyas and trauma release are the same thing. They don't have to be emotional. They're not harmful. They're usually the layer before the deeper emotion underneath. They can take many, many different forms, like tons of different forms, but usually it does involve some sort of physical expression. And I've been observing them over and over again in people and myself, and I feel like we need to be comfortable with this method of our body's form of healing and purging. And if you have any questions about them, or if you want to share what your type of Kriyas have been, I would love to hear about it. I am sending you all my love.